Welcome to this channel, The Disillusioned Banker. Today I shall be doing a quick casual study into Bill Ackman's SPAC, Pershing Square Tontine, as well as his deal with Vivendi regarding the Universal Music Group spin-off. Now before I jump into the topic, I wanted to do a quick introduction about this channel as well as necessary disclaimers to be spelled out. So while I go on my self-indulgent segue, you guys can just lock eyes with Billie Eilish over here. I'm based in Asia. I've been working in private banking for about 6 years. During that time, I wore multiple hats in a hybrid role where I executed trades for clients in stocks and bonds, as well as book ran IPOs and private placements. And on the side, I did some coverage for equities and fixed income as well. So enough about me. Necessary disclaimers. The first is that I have no holdings in the SPAC, nor any stake in Pershing Square or any of the equity positions that they hold. All right, so this channel is for entertainment and education purposes only. It's not a buy or sell, so think of it as just extra information which may be useful or useless, but extra information nonetheless that you can use in your arsenal going into the deal. Now, let's go into the topic. The first is that I'm not going to be covering what this spec structure is. I mean, how this spec structure is broken down, and neither am I going to be covering who Bill Ackman is. I think that has been widely covered and well circulated. I shall be focusing on questions I've seen crop up over Reddit and Twitter, namely concerns regarding the ADR, as well as what an investment in Universal would entail. Okay, so the two topics, broadly speaking, would be number one, what an investment, what a holding in Universal would mean for shareholders via the SPAC. And in this topic, I'll be going through a brief history of Vivendi and how they came about with a marriage with how they came about marrying Universal, and what are the key issues that activists would most likely bring up in today's meeting, which I think will be taking place 10 a.m. Paris time, which would be 4 a.m. American time. All right. So the first would be Universal's history. Now, let's go to this screen right here. Now, Universal was a water company at one point of time, so it had a very interesting history. It was named, and let me try this out, Compagnie Generale Dios. I probably butchered that, but it's too late now. This is by the way, this is a one-shot video, so pardon me if I pause time to time to collect my thoughts and look through my notes. So this company was created by an imperial decree of Napoleon III, who's the nephew of the first ever Napoleon, the Napoleon you're thinking of in your head right now. So yeah, I mean, UMG is basically spinning off from a legacy of Napoleon's bloodline. And they did a lot of M&A throughout the years. I'll just go through this tab here. So they had a history of acquisitions after the founding of about 20 years of M&A. And that is a lot of acquisitions. Thereafter, the group was transformed because by that point of time, it had become like a corporate Frankenstein, where they added body parts and severed limbs, and thus was renamed Vivendi. Now, Vivendi then went on to do more acquisitions, mergers, and divestments. So, guys, if you were the banking syndicate for this company, you would be having an amazing resume. I mean, look at this, right? So, that's pretty much how the company was formed, and how they came about Universal was, I'm trying to find that paragraph right now. Give me a second. Here. So they bought Seagram, and Seagram was the owner of Universal Studios, which is the owner of UMG. So that's pretty much the brief history of the company, which I wanted to just share because I thought it was pretty interesting. Now, wait. Right. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Let's talk about how Vivendi makes money, or more importantly, how Universal, which will be held by spec holders, make money. So I'm going to jump to this page. Oh, crap. Merchandising. Hold on a second, guys. There we go. So UMG makes money basically from the same nature, which is music, but they break it down in granular detail, which would be number one, recorded music via physical sales or digital sales, and music publishing, which would be basically, in layman's terms, giving third parties the rights to distribute music. All right, and the third would be merchandising. Now, I like this kind of format because most of the time you'll see companies aggregate all three departments, if you will. Whereas for UMG, they break it down, and this helps the investor know which department is doing well and which department needs to buck up. Right? Now, why I like UMG is because, like almost all of Bill Ackman's picks, it's very easy to understand, it's very consumer centric, and very simple, right? Because let's be honest, who would bet against music? I think, in terms of the common human experience, besides food and suffering, music would probably be the most universal experience. Pardon the pun. So, yeah, the company is doing great. I won't go into the revenue, cash flow, all those digits, which are pretty dry. As an investor, on a very high level, all I just think about is how the company makes money, and if this way of making money will continue over the long term. So, I mean, to use a metaphor, if the revenue stream will grow into a money tree that will keep on giving, if that metaphor makes sense, right? And in my mind, it will. So that is how UMG makes money, and I want to inspect now the risks associated with such a business. So there are a lot of risks, but I just want to touch on two, which I can plainly see. The first would be retention and ownership of the artist and their work. And the second would be the competition that they would most likely have to fend off. And this takes form in the shape of Sony. So in the music industry, there are three big groups, which would be UMG, Sony, and Warner Music. right? And Sony is catching up. So let's talk about the first risk first, which is about the retention and ownership of the artists and their work. So let's go back to this tab. Now, over the last couple of days, a lot of people have read headlines such as, well, okay, headlines that imply that owning a stake in UMG would mean owning Taylor Swift. Not literally, but you know what I mean. So, is this true? I wanted to inspect that claim, and I found that things are a bit more complicated than that. Now, I'm going to talk about something very important to UMG holders, which is the masters. So, the masters are basically the original production that an artist gives up, usually gives up to the record label. Okay? And there's a reason why. So, you must understand that for the most part, 90% of music artists do not make back money for the label. So what happens usually, okay, and again I'm simplifying here, is that a label will give an advance to the artist that they see potential in. Thereafter, they record and produce music for the artist to be recouped back later after sales. Okay, and most of them do not recoup back any advancements made. Now, Taylor Swift was of course a rare gem. She made millions for the company, but in exchange for producing her music, she gave up her masters. Right. So over here you can see Taylor Swift's masters just sold for 300 million. None of the profits go to her. Now, when I read this headline, and again, I've never really dived deep into the music industry. I did dabble a bit in some entertainment and media content companies, but never really pure play music. So I learned that in the industry, there's this thing called the masters, which I've just explained what it is, and Taylor Swift actually sold away, well, not really sold away, but she signed away her masters to the label group in exchange for production, right? Now, what happened in 2019 was that Ithaca Holdings purchased Big Machine label group. This was a group that Taylor Swift signed to. And the year prior, in 2018, Swift declined to sign a new contract with BMLG and signed with Universal instead. Now, here is where it gets interesting, which is not very common. Swift, when signing the contract, dictated terms which allowed her to keep her masters. All right? So, let me spell out the implications. The first thing is that, and by the way, something interesting to note, when Ithaca Holdings purchased BMLG for 300 mil, almost half of the valuation was purely from Swift, or Swift's catalog, right? And this was the first 6 albums. Okay, now here are some implications. First thing, whenever you hear a song by Taylor Swift that was played out of her first 6 albums, UMG mostly would not, I don't think they earn any money from it, right? It's still owned by BMLG because they own her masters. Now, moving forward, when Swift records her albums with Universal, they will earn a cut. But here is where it becomes a double-edged sword. So the good thing about this deal is that I think that Swift will most likely stay with UMG purely because they were willing to let her keep her masters. On the flip side though, it can be an untenable situation if Swift decides to leave UMG for whatever reason. I mean, you know how these artists are. There's always going to be disputes, fallouts. Maybe, I'm just saying maybe. And if that were to happen, UMG would not be able to retain rights to the masters. So, as if I were an investor, that would be, I wouldn't say a red flag. I mean, it would just be um, something I would put on the back burner to think about. But for now, I'm not really worried about it because I think Swift is happy at UMG. Like I said, not many labels are willing to do that with their artists. So this is where I think the key, like always in media industry they say content is king. So in the music industry, masters are king. Okay, well that sounded weird, but yeah, masters are kings, and the artist is important, but even more so are the masters because the artists can come and go, but if you own the masters, you can pretty much capitalize on the masters any way you wish. So, for example, I mean, let's say you take a Marvel movie, Captain America versus Iron Man. If Captain America sings love story to Iron Man, you, the person that owns the masters gets a cut. Now, if Captain America sings love story to Iron Man and they did not get your permission to do so, you can sue them for money and you'll still profit. So owning the masters is very masterful. Now, what was I gonna do next? Oh yeah, I was gonna talk about the. So that's the first risk I see, and just something. So over here, I did a quick Google search. In August 2019, Swift officially announced her plans to re-record her first 6 albums. Now this is where it gets really funny. So recall I said that Swift had recorded her first 6 albums with BMLG, correct? Now, because she couldn't buy the masters from BMLG before it was sold to Ithaca, she decided to re-record all her first 6 albums instead. So basically, she re-recorded her masters to become the master of her masters, and Ithaca would have the old masters. So yeah, it gets kind of complicated, but basically there would be now 2 people owning her albums, her masters, right? And this is really interesting. So it shows you how important the masters are. That an artist is willing to go out and spend and re-record all first 6 albums, which I don't think is an easy feat. It probably is for her, but I mean, it would be really a nightmarish feat for me to do that. And yeah, she's going to re-record all her 6 albums. Now, there was something really interesting I found. Well, not I found that, my friend told me about. Hold on a second. So, this is the guy who owns Ithaca Holdings that bought over Scooter Brown. He was the owner of. He's the chairman of Ithaca Holdings, and he owns the Big Machine label. So he and Taylor Swift have this dispute, have this rivalry going on, and Taylor Swift. And so you notice how Scooter Brown, this is his birthday, right? So Taylor Swift. There. Yeah. So Taylor Swift. Okay, the first thing, there is a differentiation between the old album and the new. The new album will have more songs, so that gives an incentive for fans to purchase the new album. Plus, they're loyal fans of hers and they hate Scooter anyway. But here's the funny thing. This news came out on June 18th. She broke the news on the same day as Scooter's birthday. So yeah, that was a pretty like slap to his face. Anyways, moving on. Excuse me. All right, the second risk I was mentioning would be the competition, the competition from Sony. So remember I said that the big three, that would be UMG, Sony, followed by Warner Music Group. Now, I think among okay, so just a bit of history before we expand on this further. It wasn't always the case that there was the big three. Initially, it was just I think not about a decade ago, 2012 was it? Yeah, 2012. There were the big four. So in 2012, one of the big four, which was EMI, was acquired by UMG, and it wasn't an easy acquisition. There were a lot of watchdogs, pretty much going against or warning against the deal, saying that it would disrupt the industry, the balance of powers, and it would, pretty much cause UMG to have too much influence and pricing controls in the industry. But it went through anyway, much to the rejoicement of UMG or Vivendi shareholders. Right? Now, one thing to note when I was looking into this topic was that I found Tencent to be a very powerful behind the scenes shareholder. So this article was published just this time last year. Yeah, just about there. And what you'll notice is that Tencent, hold on a second. Where are we? Oh gosh. I'm so sorry, guys. There we go. So in the past 4 months, Tencent acquired minority stake. So this was a 10% in UMG, and they have 2% in WMG. Plus, they have 9% in Spotify. Now, I'm not sure if this has changed, but I know they have added another 10% in UMG. So if I go here, I hope I get it right this time. Nope. Yes, there we go. So on this page, you can see that in December 31st December 2019, Vivendi and a Tencent-led consortium, which includes TME and other investors, acquired 10% of UMG's share capital. Okay, and this was at that point in time based on a 30 billion valuation, right, of 100% of UMG's share capital. Now, what was interesting was that they had an option to acquire more down the road should they choose to, and they exercised that option to acquire a further 10% over here. Right, so Tencent is obviously very interested in UMG, and they're interested in the music industry as a whole because right now, Tencent pretty much has a fly on the wall advantage to observe every single boardroom they go into, which pretty much makes up most of the music industry, except for Sony. So this is where I am just speculating that in the future, UMG may work with Universal through the encouragement of Tencent, because they're pretty much all in bed together, and Sony is the only company not owned by Tencent. Yeah, they have a pretty big rivalry going on. So yeah, in the future you may see Sony fight UMG, and it probably would be the battle of two giants. Right, so Sony's growing. I think I see something over here. Sony's worldwide headcount grew from 8,200 to 9,900. And okay, I can't recall where I saw it, but Sony has been buying up stake, has been buying up, actively buying up their own shares so as to kind of ward away Tencent from entering into the company. So all in all, I just think that Sony will be a major competitor to UMG. And yeah, it's just something to watch out for. I think whenever I whenever I research an equity, what am I saying? Equity holding, which I may be interested to add into my portfolio, I would recommend to actually research the competitors as well. Because at the end of the day, as good as the company is, it's only as good as, they're only as good when they are able to compete with the closest competitor. Not sure if that came out right, but it's too late now. So, okay, give me a second, guys. Now, there's another thing I wanted to look at would be the debt. So, Vivendi has been downgraded by Fitch, and the reason for the downgrade, and Fitch is basically one of the big three when it comes to rating agencies for rating the bonds of company, right? Now, their reason for a downgrade was that selling or disposing of a 60% stake in UMG, which is the largest contributor of Vivendi's earnings before interest tax, would be bad for the company. Sorry, I have a bit of a dry throat. So now the odd thing is that if you look at this tab, Vivendi actually said that the cash generated by this transaction, and they're talking about the transaction of the spin-off, would be able to help reduce financial debt. So what the CEO is saying is that this spin-off actually will help take off some financial burden, while Fitch is saying that selling this company may give you a liquid injection, but it would be bad for you over the long term, because where else are you going to get the revenue, which would flow down into EBITDA. Sorry, EBITDA. Yeah. Now, that is an arguable point of contention, but it is interesting that the spin-off came at this time, and I do believe that a lot of times companies will cite, right valuation or a good market timing for reasons to spin off a company or a subsidiary, sorry. But there are also other reasons, and one of which is to pare down debt. So there's just something to keep in mind when looking through the company. Now let's move on to the final topic, which would be what I think are the issues that would be raised in the meeting that will be held today, essentially. So the first thing is that Bill and Vivendi will be facing a lot. Well, okay, I wouldn't say a lot, but they'll be facing some resistance from activists that are having positions in Vivendi. So, namely Blue Bell Capital. I was going to say Blue Ball, but yeah, Blue Bell Capital. Another guy is this one. Oh, hold on a second. Sorry, this one, Artisan Fund, right? And then Liu. So, look, there are a lot of words here, but basically, what they're trying to, basically, the complaint is that, hold on, let me find the paragraph. Right, here it goes. Selling off pieces of UMG to other investors in return for cash is suboptimal. we would prefer that Vivendi spin off its entire ownership of UMG to the shareholders in a tax efficient manner. Now, when I first read this, I was honestly not very clear about what they meant. I mean, we can take this as face value that they just don't like the deal, but what do they mean by it not being tax efficient to shareholders, right? So, hold on, yeah. Okay, now this is Investopedia, and look, these are a lot of words, but I'm just going to break it down in layman's terms as simply as I can. Hopefully it'll help. So when a company spins off a subsidiary, there are a few ways they can spin it off. Okay, so the spin-off, carve out, split off. But let's just talk about spin-offs. So in a spin-off, there are taxable spin-offs and non-taxable spin-offs. Okay, so here you'll say understanding taxable spin-offs, and then there are also tax-free spin-offs. All right. Now, under the structure of the deal that UMG will be going through, it falls under a taxable spin-off. All right. The reason why is that if you see one of the two ways that a company can undertake a tax-free spin-off, it is either through a distribution of the new shares to existing shareholders on a pro rata basis, at least 80%, or the more popular way that I think investors would prefer, which I would certainly prefer, would be that the shareholders get the option to choose between shares in the parent or shares in the subsidiary. So most of the time, if you see a tax-free spin-off, shareholders that are in the company Vivendi, they will get the option to choose between holding the parent co, which would be Vivendi in this case, or the spin co. Yeah, the spin co, which would be UMG. All right, but this is not the case. They are only selling it fractionally. So in this case, the parent company, okay, so in this case, there will be some complications when it comes to tax, which are generally seen as not favorable to investors, which would be the ordinary income tax, as well as the capital gains tax. Right, because he's selling part of the company to Bill Ackman. Now, again, this is not always the case. Sometimes the benefit of spinning off in this manner outweighs the tax concerns. And I mean, I would just be honest, there are a lot of nuances when it comes to tax issues, which I think even corporate lawyers have a hard time digesting. But generally, to keep it simple, I believe that the activists are asking for a 1-to-1 spin-off where the company essentially disassociates with the subsidiary as a whole, and it allows for the transaction to be tax-free to both the parent and the shareholder company. All right. Yeah, so this is how they avoid taxation. And I think that's what the activists will be voting for, or will be at least raising the issue to the board during today's meeting. But I'll just say that I don't think this will be an issue because the owner, the guy who holds the major seat, I guess his name is, hold on, yeah, Valor Group, right? They aren't really, I mean, if they have the majority vote, and it seems that they are going to get that, this issue would be just swiped away. All right. Now, sorry, I think I missed this article. Over here, I wanted to show you something interesting. This was back in May 18th. This was before Bill Ackman made his announcement that he was interested, that he would be seeking out a deal with Vivendi with spinning off UMG. Over here, and this was again before Bill Ackman came in the picture, they were looking for a US investor. So wait, let me try to find a paragraph for you. There. Vivendi said today that it is currently analyzing the opportunity of selling off this additional 10%, okay, to an American investor. Now we all know who that American investor is now, but at that point of time, no one did. There were some comments here speculating that could it be Liberty Media? But it turned out to be Ackman, right? And why I wanted to show this article was that I read a few comments on Reddit and Twitter saying that it could be possible that Ackman actually uses his remaining funds in Tontine to purchase more of UMG. So now he's asking for 10, he could ask for 20. And this is unlikely because now remember, Vivendi had already had 20%, and they are looking to retain at least 10%. So let's start with this paragraph right here. If the whole US investor thing doesn't work out, okay, Vivendi said that they would offload the additional 10% in Universal by initiating a public offering. So basically, they're trying to increase the public spread if the US investor thing did not work out, which it did at the end. So instead of floating 70, they could end up floating 70 instead of just 60. Right? Now, no matter what they float, they will have to retain 10% for a minimum period of 2 years in order to remain associated with the development of, okay, so basically they have to keep 10% based on this legislation to be part of UMG. Right? So it is unlikely that they're going to give up any more than 10%. So for now, from where I'm sitting, it seems that Bill is just going to ask for 10, and the remaining shares in Tontine will be put to work in another company. All right, so I just want to clear that up because I've seen some people asking about that very topic. Right, now let's go to ADRs. So if I were, now I'm not in the US, so I don't really know the specifics of what you can hold in your Roth IRA, but I've been hearing some friends of mine telling me that if you are a retail investor and you have a Roth IRA that invested in PSTH, it would be, I don't know, like it would be a hassle to hold foreign shares, and they would rather have ADRs instead. So ADRs are basically American deposit receipts that to explain it in a simple form, is just a mimic of the foreign company shares on the New York Stock Exchange. Now, I've been trying to find information as to if UMG was going to facilitate an ADR program. I have not found anything of substance thus far that would confirm this. The latest slides that Bill showed, it gave a timeline in which UMG, let me say this again. It gave a timeline that in December, PSTH holders would be getting UMG shares. Now, it never said where the UMG shares would be listed, but it was kind of speculated that those would be the ADRs. But again, right now it's pretty vague. So to be honest, I don't think anyone knows except maybe Bill. And they are going to, the Vivendi shareholders are going to get the shares first, which will be listed in Amsterdam. I think 3 months earlier, if I recall. But I know I just like have a mental image in my brain that the PST shareholders would be getting UMG shares in December, right? Now, one thing the reason why I came to this page is that this was regarding UMG BV financing. This was published March 26, 2021. It's usually the case that if Vivendi, the parent company, has ADRs, they would probably be more open to the idea of spinning off UMG as an ADR as well. So, the best of both worlds would be UMG having, okay, Vivendi and UMG having their shares listed in France and Amsterdam respectively, as well as both companies having ADRs on the New York Stock Exchange. That would be the best of both worlds. But unfortunately, as I look into the news and this statement right here, unsponsored ADRs, which basically means ADRs that are purely, what's the word I want to use? The ADRs are not done with consent from the parent company. So basically, broker dealers will buy some stock and they will list some ADRs, which are usually traded over the counter with very little liquidity. So if you want good liquidity with the backing of the company, is usually in the form of a sponsored ADR. Now, over here you can see, and this was dated March this year, Vivendi does not sponsor an ADR in respect of its shares. Any ADR facility currently in existence is unsponsored and has no ties whatsoever with Vivendi. So now this doesn't mean automatically that UMG won't get an ADR, but it just puts a bit of a, I don't know what's the word, like a cold blanket on the situation, because it makes me think if I were then a shareholder of UMG and Vivendi has a strong say in the path of which UMG will list, they may not be as open to an ADR for UMG. I'm just thinking in that mode right now. But again, Bill with his charm, let's hope he gets an ADR for UMG. Because if I were a shareholder, I would want UMG to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It would help smooth out any currency translation concerns, as well as tax concerns, on your dividends, on your gains, and as well as your Roth IRA concerns. So again, I'm not an American, so I can't really I'm not really knowledgeable in terms of the restrictions of a Roth IRA, but this is what I've just heard from friends over there, that there are limitations as to what you can buy with a Roth IRA, and foreign stocks seem to be one of them. Okay, and over here, and okay, I'm trying to find a sentence. Crap. Oh gosh, where are we? There we go. So over here, this was dated May 26, which was just a few days before Ackman came in. The investor fund, the activist fund Bluebell has also asked for Universal's listing to be shifted to the New York Stock Exchange. So again, this tells me, this almost confirms with me that as of now, there isn't any plan for Universal to be listed on the NYSE. It's still going to be listed on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. Now, some people have been asking, why would will be okay with it listing on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange on Euronext, right? I mean, isn't that market rather illiquid? Not the case. The strange thing is that due to Brexit, now I mean, okay, the London Stock Exchange isn't a great comparison, but this is what I've read from another article that I can't seem to find right now. But so you just have to believe me. Um, since Brexit, London, in terms of liquidity and volume traded overall, has actually dropped below the Euronext, which I mean, in the industry, this would be surprising. I mean, I'm working in the trading industry. Usually, the accepted belief or the normal belief is that London has more liquidity than Euronext. So yeah, I mean that could probably be a reason why they just. I mean that could be a justification, right? I mean the the shareholders would probably say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we are listing on Amsterdam, but hey, Euronext has more liquidity now than London. It ain't so bad. So yeah, this will be an interesting development to follow. I'm hoping more news comes out on this during the agenda, and yeah, let's see how it goes. So that's pretty much my first dive into Pershing Square Tontine. I hope you found it interesting, and thanks for watching.